Hello, true duelists. YGO Strats here, coming at you with another You Should Play of a video I had penned out loosely some months ago, but decided it's too meta relevant. Is that a good reason to not make a video? Probably the exact opposite. But I feel like there's going to be more people who play casually complaining in the comments than competitive players saying yes you should in regards to a You Should Play Swordsoul. Now, I've waited for the opportune time to make this video because on the day in which I'm releasing this, Magnificent Mavens is only 2 days away, which means you might be able to actually afford playing Swordsoul. And I think the biggest deterrent and biggest complaint the more casually oriented crowd has about meta decks is not just their strength, but their price point. It's amazing how hated Nekroz was until we could afford it, and now it's a fun, niche, rogue, unplayable ritual deck, and therefore it's good now. And that's the key. How hated a deck is directly proportionate to how much it will cost for you to be able to play it. It's just the facts. Now, getting into the Swordsouls, I'm going to first take the time here just to say sorry in advance, because these are cards based on Chinese somethings. I'm not going to pretend I know. I don't know if they're actually based on any Chinese legend or not, but I do know that they have names that are inspired or influenced or based on Chinese pronunciations. And as you can visibly tell, my skin tone is not nearly distinct enough from this shirt for me to be able to appropriately pronounce these words. So apologies in advance for my butchering of these Chinese words. To make up for it, the deck is often known for playing this card, which is French in name, and I will choose to deliberately disrespect the French in this video by only referring to this card as Banom Denedge. Yeah, that's right, fucking Quebecois. I know about Banom Denedge, and I won't say it right. You want to put that shit in the world for me to have to look at? I'm not pronouncing it right. Why is that? What the fuck is that? Matter of fact, before we get into Swordsoul here, just real quickly need to say, if you ever see Banom Denedge out in the wilderness, morally speaking, now legally not the case, but morally speaking, you know what you should do. I know what you should do. You know what you should do. Moving on, Swordsoul was released technically first in Dawn of Majesty. That's right, the Irish Swordsoul, a card almost nobody plays, was released first. This was, of course, completely irrelevant, and really the deck was released in Burst of Destiny, a set that truly shook up the metagame before the Albaz Structure deck was released and really shook up the metagame. And then we all played that before Power of the Elements was released to really shake up the metagame. And now we're approaching Magnificent Mavens with the Ishizu cards, here to shake up the metagame. What a trend. Swordsouls are a very, very simple deck. It is truly comparable to the Tellarknight deck of old, and that Tellars are Baby's first Xyz deck, and really Swordsoul's kind of Synchro's Baby's first deck. It's the cards make themselves. The difference is Tellarknight is bad, and Swordsoul's actually still pretty good, just not at the top tables. This is a 2022 deck, and therefore, you know, it's a little better than that. And no, I don't care that it was released in 2021. Shut up. Let's just jump into it. Get into the monsters. First up is Moye. Moye will reveal a worm or Swordsoul card in your hand to summon a Swordsoul token on summon, and if it's sent to the grave for a synchro summon, it lets you draw a card. This is a good way to chain block the in-archetype stuff, and it's also just free advantage, and it's free synchro by itself. You're gonna see that a lot. The Swordsoul token is always level 4 tuner, and it always locks you into only synchro monsters while on the field, because at the time this deck was released, Hulk was still a card. Other cards of note include Longwan. He discards a worm or Swordsoul to special summon himself from hand. It summons the token when doing so, and if sent to the graveyard for a synchro summon, burn 1200. That's right, we have a main deck way to win in time. Just because. We also have Taya, who can banish a Swordsoul or Worm monster from your graveyard to summon the token, and if sent to the graveyard for a synchro summon, is a Foolish Burial for any Worm or Swordsoul card, which is pretty darn cool. There's also, of course, Ecclesia 2.0. This is Lone Fire Blossom, and it's also a tuner that can special summon itself from hand as long as the opponent controls more monsters than you. It also has an effect to synergize with fusion monsters, but unless you're playing Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, you will not be adding it from grave to hand at the end of your turn. And those are the main deck monsters. The Iris Swordsoul also exists, but actually it doesn't. I'm retconning its existence. I don't play it, so I'm not gonna talk about it. Now, there's also the fact that these cards are just perfect with Tenyi, because not only were Tenyi monsters all reprinted in the Ghosts from the Past 2 set, so their price has gone down a decent amount, or at least there's more printings of them for you to get, but also the Tenyis are worm monsters. Yeah, the worm type, the thing Konami made in like 2014 to be able to make dragon cards without making dragon cards and abusing dragon support. The Tenyis all special summon themselves from the hand if you control no monsters or only non-effect monster, which is, you know, like the Swordsoul token, so there's very good synergy. And they all have an effect that they can banish themselves from the hand or graveyard so long as there is a non-effect monster on the field. Vishuddha is a card some people think should be banned at various points, which is always funny to me, and it's just banish and bounce a card on the opponent's field to the hand, as long as you got that non-effect monster. Ashana will summon any Tenyi from the deck, but locks you into worm-type monsters only for the turn, which in regards to Swordsoul is hardly a bad thing. And then the most common other played is Adhara, a level 1 tuner to go with your 2 level 7s I just mentioned that make for easy level 8s that this deck already does, and can banish itself to grab a banished Tenyi back to the hand to keep your loops going. There's also the one of Shatana, which some people play because it's decent. When a non-effect worm is destroyed, you can banish this, summon back that non-effect monster, and pop a card the opponent controls. And then the Spell and Trap. They have a Monster Reborn, they have a Rhoda, and they have a Icarus attack. The Rhoda searches any Swordsoul monster or any worm monster if you control a Synchro. The Monster Reborn is Monster Reborn of a Swordsoul or a worm if you control a Synchro, probably. I don't play it. And the Icarus attack is great to combo with Shatana, specifically, and the Monk of the Tenyi. Other than that, the spells can reduce or increase a monster's level by 1 when they're banished, and when a trap is banished, it summons the level 4 tuner token. Not bad. Not bad at all. For your extra deck options, the truest Swordsoul card ever, Banom Denedge. Fucking French people. A level 10 Omni Negate. You're probably going to want to play it. Can you afford it? Who knows? And on to the Swordsoul monsters in the extra deck. They've got 3 thus far. First up is Chi-Chao, which I've said wrong, of course. Level 8, 2800 attack, very nice. This has 2 effects. You can only activate one of them per turn, so if you've used one, you can't use the other. The first one is that on Synchro Summon, it can add a Swordsoul card from deck to hand or banish a Swordsoul card from your deck. This is relevant because of the trapped summoning tuner effect. Its other effect is that it can banish any worm or Swordsoul card from your graveyard to target one monster on the field and negate its effects. It's a monster negate. It's a good deck in 2018. It's a good deck in 2021. What did you expect? Next up is their 2 10s. The first level 10 is still ridiculously cracked in my eyes, Cheng Ying. It will gain 100 attack for every banished card and make the opponent's monsters lose 100 attack for every banished card. He gets big. If it would be destroyed by card effect, it can banish a card from your graveyard instead, and most importantly, if a card is banished except for during the damage step, it can banish 1 card from each of the opponent's field and graveyard. It doesn't target, it doesn't destroy, it gets big as fuck, and he looks pretty damn cool. He's posted up, you know? If I saw a man doing this shit with a sword, I'd run. If I saw a man with a sword, I'd run, I suppose, but, you know, the pose would especially be concerning. And last up is Evil Longwan. Yeah, there's lore to this deck if you want to look into it, but Swordsoul Sinister Sovereign Kixing Longwan. Apologies to any person of Chinese ethnicity or understanding of that language after having pronounced that. This card is fuck you to the adventure engine. It's also Swordsoul Hyper Librarian, because if you synchro summon a worm monster, you get to draw a card. Why not? If the opponent special summons a monster, you can banish it and then deal 1200 damage. And if they activate a spell or trap card, you can banish it and deal 1200 damage. So it's a little bit of spot removal and it's a little bit of bullying. So it's just all that more means to win in time. And since it's level 10, you probably summoned it with Longwan and have burnt 1200 that way, which means by the end of the second turn, you've burnt 3600 life points. And if you've also got a Chengying boosting up, it's a decent deck. The other cards I've got in front of me are Monk of the Tenyi, which is just the thing you'll summon off your Tenyis a lot. There's also Shaman of the Tenyi, which can revive a worm from your graveyard by discarding a card. But after you do so, you can't activate the effects of monsters summoned from the extra deck except for Tenyi monsters, which is important. If you're playing Draco, Berserker, Tenyi Man, Synchro, Big Bungus, not bad, but it's important to note. Also, if a non-effect monster declares an attack, this card can pop a card on the field. That is sometimes relevant. And the last one I really want to mention and highlight is Baxia, because Baxia is an insane card in this deck, and it does a lot for it. Now, the spin effect is cute, especially if you make it with, say, Taya to spin 2 cards back into the deck, but really what's up is that you can destroy a card on your field to revive a card from your graveyard, a monster, which lets you loop some of your Tenyis or your Swordsouls to get effects that you haven't otherwise gotten, especially like, say, make Baxia using Taya, use Taya to send Moye, use Baxia's effect to pop a card or even a Self or something to bring back Moye to get another Synchro, or maybe you bring back Adhara and make Chaofeng because Chaofeng's a fucking nuisance and you just don't want to let your opponent activate light monster effects or something. Who knows? The world's your oyster. And that's all the cards, so why play them? 2 reasons I think are pretty fair ones. Number 1, reprints. Magnificent Mavens is about to drop, and these cards are about to be pretty damn affordable, or at least compared to what they have been. This is especially true, I think, because the Ishizu cards exist from that set, and they're the money cards. They're the chase ones, or maybe the new Sky Striker support or whatever. I don't think too many people are going to be hyper-focused on the Swordsoul archetype, and it'll probably be more affordable. That means that you can afford to play it. And 2, it's still good. The deck hasn't been meaningfully hit at any point. Sure, Protoss banning was necessary, but that didn't stop the consistency of the Moye summonings or the Taya or the long ones. It's just as playable as it was back then, it's just not the top tier threat. Which means when tier Ichizu deck combo fusion stop gets hit inevitably in the future, as it will, there's a chance that Swordsoul will rise up as a competent, still good deck, and then you'll hear people being like, oh, well, that makes sense, and the deck wasn't hit, so actually it was always a good deck, but it just wasn't seeing play, like I'm doing right now. That'll be bolstered, presumably, by the fact that if these reprints are super affordable, then more people will have access to playing it, and so that'll kind of bolster numbers and all that jazz. So I think it's a safe prediction for me to be making. And I think the third thing is that it's kind of baby's first synchro deck. It plays itself. If you don't know what you're doing with Swordsoul Tenyi, you can still make decent boards. You can make your Chi-Chao, Banom, Dead Edge, and maybe the Icarus attack. And that's not the most insanely good board that has ever existed, but it is a decent one. And sometimes all it takes is being decent to win out at locals. The beauty of the deck is that if you know what you're doing, you can make some really crazy boards. You can get out a Chi-Chao before you've even used your normal summon, and then also get the long one as well. So there's plenty of ceiling to get to in the deck, and the floor is high enough that as you're learning it, you won't always be losing, which I think is appealing when picking up a deck. That, coupled with the fact that it is significantly cheaper than it was at one point, or I'm assuming it is because reprints lower the value of cards, it's a solid deck. I also really love synchro summons. I'm just biased towards that. I love that you can just shit out free synchros turn after turn, big bungus level 8s of whatever choice you like. I like that Moye being water means Dragite's playable, because that card looks cool as fuck. And it's actually decent. A spell and trap negate ain't terrible. And that's where I'm gonna wrap this up, because what more is there to say? If you like level 8 synchros, if you like level 10 synchros, if you want to be able to summon Ruddy Rose Dragon and piss off people at your locals by putting emphasis on Ruddy, because not a single human being on this earth likes the name Ruddy Rose Dragon for that card, what the fuck was that, Konami? Then I think this is a great deck for you. If you like having the opportunity to turn your brain off by main decking Rivalry of Warlords and shitting out decent-ass synchros and stopping the opponent from playing, I think you can have fun with this deck. And if you just like cool looking sword armor wearing people, dragon-esque dudes and gals in armor, like the Swordsoul's are, I think that you'll like this deck. It's a solid deck, it's a good deck, I find it kind of fun. Is that a hot take? It's board soul. It's not, you know, it's not the craziest wombo combo, but I've enjoyed it. And that's it. So you already watched the video. So if you could do me a favor, if you could hit the subscribe button, if you can like the video, if you can figure out the hidden meaning behind why the fuck the Quebecois put Banom Denedge onto this earth for all of us to have to endure, I would thank you for each and every one of those actions you perform. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if anyone asks why you're playing this deck right now or whatever, you can just tell them about your smoking Italian wife. That's right, I haven't forgotten. Shoutouts to the smoking Italian wives out there. Swagio Strats, I'll see you later.
You dick!